Let's dive into two of the most fascinating faiths to ever come out of ancient India, Jainism and Buddhism. Both popped up around the 6th century BCE, which was a time of massive change, not just in India, but really all over the world. You have to wonder, what was in the air back then that set the stage for such a radical shift in thinking? To really get Jainism and Buddhism, we've got to ask this central question. What was going on that people were so ready for something brand new? I mean, how did these two movements get so popular that they could actually challenge the entire established order? That's the story we're going to unpack. All right, so to answer that, we first need to paint a picture of the world they were born into. This wasn't just a gentle shift in ideas. It was a powerful reaction to some very real, very frustrating problems that people were facing every single day. Just look at what was going on. Religious rituals had become super complex and so expensive that ordinary people couldn't afford them. Society was locked into a rigid caste system. If you were born at the bottom, you stayed at the bottom. The sacred texts, they were all in Sanskrit, a language that most people couldn't speak or read. And on top of it all, for a society that depended on agriculture, the huge number of animal sacrifices was becoming a massive economic burden. The whole system just wasn't working for the average person, and they were desperate for an alternative. And right in the middle of all this chaos, two incredible figures step onto the scene. And here's the crazy part. They were both princes. They had literally everything you could ever want, but they chose to leave it all behind. This is what's so amazing about their origin stories. You've got Vardhamana Mahavira and Gautama Buddha, both born into the warrior clan, the Kshatriyas. They grew up surrounded by luxury, but something just wasn't right. They both felt this deep dissatisfaction with the world and decided to give it all up to go searching for a deeper truth. Now, Mahavira's journey was intense. He chose a path of extreme self-discipline. For 12 long years, he put himself through incredible hardship, really pushing his body to the absolute limit. His whole idea was that the only way to free his soul and reach true liberation, or moksha, was to completely master all physical needs and desires. For Prince Siddhartha, the man who would become the Buddha, the journey started completely differently. It began with a sudden, shocking wake-up call. See, he'd been sheltered inside his palace his whole life, but one day he took a chariot ride, and what he saw changed everything. We call them the four great sights. First up, he saw a frail, stooped old man, and for the very first time it hit him. Youth doesn't last. Everyone, including him, was going to get old one day. Then he saw a person racked with sickness, and in that moment, he understood the reality of disease and physical pain, that our bodies are fragile and vulnerable. The third sight was probably the most shocking of all, a dead body being carried for cremation. He was forced to face the stark, unavoidable truth of mortality, that all life eventually ends. But just when it seemed like everything was about suffering and loss, he saw a fourth sight. It was a wandering ascetic, a holy man, who looked completely calm and peaceful. And in that man, Siddhartha saw a flicker of hope. He saw that there might be a way out, a path to understanding and overcoming all this suffering, and that was the moment he decided he had to leave the palace and find that path for himself. Okay, so they've seen the problems. They've gone on these incredible personal journeys. What did they come back with? What were the actual solutions, the core teachings they offered to the world? Mahavira's teachings really boil down to what are called the tri-ratnas, or the three jewels. He taught that the path to liberation, to moksha, had nothing to do with expensive rituals. It was all about a personal commitment to three key things: having the right faith, gaining the right knowledge, and living with the right conduct. So what's the end game in Jainism? This symbol pretty much lays it out. The whole goal is to clean the soul of all karma, which is like the residue of all your past actions, and finally break free from the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. When you do that, the soul rises up to this abode of the liberated, this state of pure, eternal bliss. So what does right conduct actually look like in practice? Well, it's all about these 5 vows. The most famous one is ahimsa, which is a really radical commitment to nonviolence against every single living being. Then you have satya, always telling the truth, asteya, not stealing, aparigraha, not owning property, and brahmacharya, practicing chastity. It's a really clear and demanding ethical roadmap for how to live. Now, Buddha's core teaching took a different shape. He laid it out as the 4 noble truths, and it's almost like a doctor's diagnosis. First, he identifies the symptom. Life inevitably involves suffering.
Second, he finds the cause. Our suffering comes from our desires and attachments. Third, the good news, the prognosis. This suffering can actually end. And finally, the prescription. There's a clear path you can follow to make it stop.
And that prescription is the Eightfold Path. Buddha famously called this the middle way. Why? Because it avoids both the extreme luxury he grew up with and the extreme self-punishment that he saw other ascetics practicing. It's a balanced, practical guide for life made up of 8 interconnected ideas like right action and right thought that anyone, no matter who they were, could use to find enlightenment or nirvana. Okay, we've covered their origins, we've looked at their core ideas. Now, to really help all this sink in, let's put them side by side. Seeing the key differences is one of the best ways to understand what makes each one unique. So, a few big distinctions here. First, while Mahavira was the key figure for Jainism in his time, its core ideas were considered ancient. Buddhism, on the other hand, was a brand new thing. We've already talked about the path. Jainism focused on intense austerity, while Buddhism championed that balanced middle path. On a deeper level, Jains believe every living thing has an eternal soul, or Atma. Buddhism, however, teaches the idea of Anatman, that there is no permanent, unchanging self. And finally, look at their reach. Jainism largely stayed within India, while Buddhism spread like wildfire all across Asia and beyond. You know, for all their differences, the impact these two faiths had on the world is just immense. Their legacies aren't just tucked away in old books. You can see them carved into stone and woven right into the culture of half the world. Just look at this. The Jain tradition inspired some of the most breathtakingly detailed architecture on the planet, like these Dilwara temples. This incredible craftsmanship isn't just about making something beautiful, it's a physical expression of the Jain principles of patience, dedication, and deep reverence for life. And Buddhism's architectural legacy is equally awe-inspiring. You have massive structures like the Great Stupa at Sanchi, which became huge centers for pilgrimage and study. As Buddhism traveled along the Silk Road, these ideas about peace and compassion and the art that came with them left an indelible mark on cultures from Afghanistan to Japan. But you know, maybe their most profound legacy is what they accomplished together. They both put ahimsa, or nonviolence, at the center of their philosophy. They both stood up and challenged the injustice of the caste system, teaching a message of equality. And this is so important. They spoke to people in their own local languages, not in the stuffy Sanskrit of the elites. They made religion accessible to everyone, and in doing so, they completely reshaped Indian society. And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? These two faiths were born as a direct response to the big problems of their day, to corruption, inequality, and violence. Their solution was a radical turn towards nonviolence, mindfulness, and taking personal responsibility. And it kind of leaves you with a pretty big question to think about. What are the biggest problems facing our world today, and what's our answer going to be?